at the Musial with Alan and Daniel. We'll talk about the Cardinals all night long. Everyone come gather round, listen to your favorite sound. We'll talk about the Cardinals all night long. We'll talk the games and all the rest, about the team that we love best. We'll talk about the Cardinals all night long. We're gonna talk about the Cardinals all night long.
Good morning and welcome into another edition of Meet Me at Musial. I'm your host, Daniel Shoptaw at C70. With me as always, Alan Medlock, a Medlock One, coming to you Saturday morning after the Cardinals drop an opener to the Mariners last night. And, Alan, Mariners a team that has really good pitching, really bad offense, and a team that's, right about the same place the Cardinals are, which is a 500 team. But overall, over the last week, 10 days, 2 weeks, Cardinals have played, I think, better than we thought they would, especially with the competition that they've been facing.
No, yes, no. It's just like we talked about a little bit a second ago. It would just be this team that decides to play well right when they're just two fingertips away from contention, start winning every series and playing well. And you one of those where you just continue a run of series dominance, but you can't put together a run of 8, 9, 10 straight like the Mets have done to put yourself back into it. But take the small wins where you can, and there's a little bit of enthusiasm in it, and it's been fun to watch. I mean, last week's games in Milwaukee were fun to watch and stressful. And last night, I knew this would be kind of one of those series that the matchup didn't work out great for the Cards because the offense is so bad and the Mariners pitching so good, and the timely hitting last night cost them. So maybe they can bounce back, win this series, and you never know. I mean, but at least make it a fun September.
Yeah, I think, again, it's good to see good games, good baseball. Even if the results aren't going to really matter, because that's
Yes.
the problem. We were talking about, winning series is all and great, but I was, kind of looking at the teams ahead of them, and just looking at the last 10. Cardinals are 6-4 in their last 10.
Yeah.
So is everybody else except the Cubs, who are 7-3, and the Mets that are 9-1. Diamondbacks are 4-6, but they're far enough ahead. They're not able to make up any ground because everybody else is winning too.
Sure.
And that's what you get when you get yourself in such a hole at, this early on. You go into September, down 6 games, or 10 on the division side or whatever. Even the games that had head to head and you beat Milwaukee, it didn't really matter because, they're playing well enough outside of everything else. So I think that, I mean, it is a little bit frustrating that the Cardinals still think that they're in it, I think, to some degree, because 20, 21, 22 games left now. You're down 6. You're third in your division. Yeah, that's asking a whole lot. Even in this day and age where you got 3 wild cards, it's very difficult to imagine everybody falling apart and the Cardinals, just kind of cruising through the wreckage on it into the playoffs.
Yeah, not necessarily for me the frustration that they still feel like they're in contention. It's more of the heartache of losing series. I mean, it's to me. This is going to it sounds silly to narrow one series, but the sweep in Cincinnati was kind of that death nail a month ago.
Mhm. Yeah.
To where you've never gotten off the mat. I mean, it's your run differential's 20 runs worse than it was. And now you're starting
Mhm.
to come back to what your expected wins might be. And it's it's slightly disappointing. You're right. I mean, it's one of those. I mean, I like to have a little bit of juice in the games going though.
Yeah.
I've enjoyed watching and just to see, but it's also one of those situations too to where I think that I kind of fell. I think that I kind of fell into this trap last year to think, hey, let's see what these young guys can do, and then build your off season to kind of feel how enthusiastic you be coming into November when everything's closed out and you get through the playoff baseball and see how they can improve as a team. A lot of those young guys are performing right now. That's fun to watch, but it still shines a light on the changes that are coming and probably need to at this point. And I know that we'll get into that later.
Yeah, the only reason I say it's frustrating the Cardinals think that they're still in it, and I will say the Cardinals are doing things that are mitigating that, right? I mean, they're playing Jordan Walker every day. They've made some moves as of recently that they're trying to figure things out for the future while still trying, in theory, to stay in competition. But center field is, I think, the biggest thing that is interesting. Michael Ciani comes off the injured list and immediately reclaims center field, even though I thought, not watching, just kind of keeping tabs on, Victor Scott seemed to be doing not only fine, but really seemed to be making some strides at the big league level. Now I know he's, they're having him do some work, and he's working with the coaches and he's still on the roster, but it seemed, I don't want to say strange, but a little bit interesting that they kind of basically threw all their chips in on Ciani here. Again, in a situation where September should be more, learning in games versus trying to win them.
Yeah, it was. No, you're right. You're right. I don't know. I was torn on this one when it happened because I thought, well, you know what? Let's just see the work. But you've also seen that they've pushed all their chips in on Walker now, and you're thinking, well, let's see what the youth movement can do. And yeah, I'm not. I honestly, this is kind of a head scratcher for me. I mean, I get it to a sense that they played well with Ciani in center field, and I guess they're hanging on to that last thread of hope, which I would expect any team to do. But yeah, it's almost one of those. You've seen how much the development has been halted per se on a Walker and a Gorman, and I think that you kind of tie that into, hey, let's not do that with Scott, type situation, and it's just it's kind of tough to explain.
Yeah, I mean, I get him wanting to work with them wanting him to work with the major league coaches, with McGee and Warner, on outfield, jumps and base running and all that stuff, and I get that. And I'm sure there can be a lot of instruction, pre games and stuff like that. But I don't know. But part of me wonders if it wouldn't have been better for him to, get some of those, some of that instruction and then go back to Memphis for the last bit of their season, and put them into practice instead of sitting on the bench in the major leagues.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, obviously Cardinals have had development issues with players for a little while now, and that's something we're going to touch on here in a minute. But and so I'm not going to automatically say, well, they're doing this wrong, because they still know better than a couple of guys sitting around talking on a Saturday morning. But it does seem weird. Again, if Victor Scott was playing like Victor Scott played in April, okay, I get it. Obviously, and there is some intrigue with Ciani. Ciani's older. I don't think that Ciani's part of any kind of, core that's coming up like Victor Scott could be, but he's played well. He obviously won him a game this week. I mean, it's not a bad thing that Michael Ciani's in there. It's just, I think that I would have committed to Victor Scott, who has made some incredible plays, although some of that's just outrunning. I think maybe hit some of his mistakes, and has has shown a little bit with the bat that he's not helpless up there. So, again, you get to watch a good defense either way. I think the bigger issue is going to be, what do they do this off season, right? I mean, do they? Because they can't have Ciani and Victor Scott both next year, I don't think, can they?
No, I thought that was a trap they kind of fell into early in the season of having two very similar players on the roster. Yeah, I'm not certain. That was my first reaction as well. Whenever they said that he'll be playing center field every day, type of situation, I was like, well, that probably points to Scott being in Memphis, quite a bit next year. But time will tell, I guess. I would like to think that this will be a no holds barred off season, but I'm just not convinced that will be the case. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
No one safe type deal, but I don't know.
Yeah. And I mean, maybe, if Sonny plays well this month and shows he's healthy and you put that all together, he's going to fall 2 innings short of being eligible for the Gold Glove, which is still a little weird to me, because of having a limit because you and I probably both remember when Rafael Palmeiro won first base with Gold
Yeah,
Glove after DHing most of the year. But it's so I mean he's definitely if there is a team out there that's looking to upgrade center field defensively with a guy that can do a little bit with the bat. And Ciani has gotten better with his bat too. I think it's only fair to say. Maybe he is a possibility to be traded this offseason in probably more like in a package or something like that. But that being said, I mean, we've talked so many times about how the Cardinals, stockpile people and don't make the trades that we think that they should make, only for it to come back and bite them because the value of that player drops significantly. I know we're talking about we may be talking about a shakeup in the front office and stuff, but that might be the most telling thing about a new direction is if they were able to, make a call like that and send Ciani out.
yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I still think that we can rally back to it is all the things that we talk about in the off season and a situation where you run into roster glut like they have now in a situation with two players that are very similar. One with more big league experience who's been successful for him this year. Could, like I said, in the quirky rules, but should probably win a Gold Glove, which is big for them. To a very similar player that could be a little more electric as things go on, but I'm not convinced that they will hit. It all wraps around to me is how much is that fan apathy that they have right now, that no one's in the stadium, going to change the way they approach the offseason as far as aggressiveness? Is it finally going to crank it up a little bit, or is it going to be more of the same, just piecemeal, try to figure it out? I think that this is going to be a perfect example with those guys, and I think Gorman kind of falls into that as well right now. Of what buy-in do they have from the organization that's going to stick, or where are they going to improve? Because one of the things right now, I don't know how much on the offense they're going to change. And I know that sounds a little bit troublesome, as we've spoken for 6 weeks about how their offensive has been dictated by their two studs, who are actually hitting, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
That may change the whole mindset of what goes on, to where one of those center field options probably go out, I would think. And I mean, I think I kind of feel the same way with Gorman a little bit. So not to go off in right field on this per se, but I just think this is a perfect example of the roster management that I think has a glaring need for change.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that you're right. I don't know how they're going to approach this winter. I do feel like the lack of fan attendance, although it was back up last night. I think I saw 37,000 for the Seattle game, which again, better weather, a better team playing, a team that's not in very often. You put all that together, weekend, it I could see why it was up. But it's still not to the levels that they're used to, and they're still not going to get to 3 million this year. I do think I think the thing that probably shakes them out of any kind of status quo approach is the people not showing up, right? Because we
Yeah.
saw, I mean, last year they finished last place. They, had 71 wins, which is what they've got right now for the whole season. And it was still, well, we just need a little bit more pitching. We don't really need to change anything. You know, I think because people were still coming and they thought they kind of had a path to, you know, erase that from memory, and it was fair. I don't want to blame them too much for that because I do understand where they're coming from. But when you put this product on the field here, you're maybe going to avoid finishing under 500 for 2 years in a row. I think it's at least possible. They'll give them the way they've played. But you're not by much, 1 or
Yeah.
2 games if you're going to be over 500. And the fact that, you had some really bad crowds and, you're not going to make your attendance thing. And I think that speaks volumes.
Agreed.
You know, again, the management ownership, they know what this team is like, but I do think they should feel, and I think they probably do feel a little bit more like we've got to do something that does some excitement for this team. Now, it may not be the right thing,
Yeah.
and it may not be what we expect them to do, but I do think it's not going to be, well, we just need pitching, so we're going to re-sign Lynn and Gibson, and we'll
Yeah.
try it again. I don't think it's going to be anything like that.
Yeah, that was what concerned me up until probably a couple of weeks ago, and I do think I think the message has been sent, so to speak, of the empty seats. I think there's a
Yeah.
little bit of embarrassment about that. I think that I wouldn't say cost people jobs, but I think there's going to be a reshuffling and kind of a um, I wouldn't say change in mindset completely, but a little bit of emphasis put on additions and movement and energy, because I think that's what they're lacking right now. Is the just lack of energy and enthusiasm, and go back to the apathy word. I mean, to me, that's that's the worst. You know,
Yeah.
I can understand just down times, but with just people that just don't care, that's a difficult situation. And that's the biggest slap in the face they've seen. I mean, I feel like offensively, yeah, like we were talking about just a few minutes ago, not a whole lot that they're going to be able to improve. I know we're going to get into the Goldschmidt here in just a little bit, but there's going to have to be, that will be, project number one, I would think. And then you kind of figure out, where you go from there. I would love to see the fact that they go get a big bat, but you're not going to displace Burleson. You're not going to displace Walker at this point. And I think that's a good thing. We've talked about the center field ad nauseum. You still have Newt Bar and your infield set, because you're going to have the Donovan Gorman situation, at second, maybe catcher, maybe go out and do something like that. But that's still the Contreras situation. He was their best offensive player. To me, if you're going to go out and you're really going to move the needle, you need big pitching additions. And that's the thing, is you're used to Burns. I know you're going to be competing against the bigwigs on that. I said, but that's one of the names that you can go out and it's going to get people there. I threw out the silly idea of the Jordan Montgomery situation because he's fallen out of favor there, but he's probably not going to opt out at this point because, it may be silly for him to do unless, next year's a $25 million option. I mean, he could potentially get 26 to 28, maybe, I don't know. But the Cardinals probably aren't going to do that for two people, but I would highly suggest they do. I am probably one of the few remaining Michaelis fans. That's something that I would entertain moving. Just because I feel like that I feel like he's performed well in the contract, but I feel like it adds to the apathy too, because I just feel like there's not just to shine light on him, but I just think that rotation is going to need a little bit of overhaul, even as well as they performed early in the season, and still keep him in games now, knowing that you have the Gray Fetty definitely coming back and you can build from there. And I mean, I would potentially go big. And I think they need to. I think that's one of the things that they're going to have to do. And I hope that this lack of attendance and lack of care is the driving factor to go out and change the approach and to be just super aggressive this offseason.
Yeah, you'd like to see that. Although, again, when they don't hit their targets, there is going to be a tendency, a
True.
desire to retool on the cheap, um, because of how they run the Cardinals.
Yeah.
And I agree with you, and I think most people would, that you've got to kind of invest in something, and they do need to do something to get people more excited. And I think getting a guy like Burns makes a lot of sense. Tying up the resources you're going to have to tie up into a pitcher is a little bit scary, just because there's a good chance at least a few months or a year of that contract you're not going to have that pitcher, right?
Yes.
That's just, I mean, pretty standard. Um, but it's better to go out and get a guy like that, I think, than to do another Steven Matz situation where who's barely pitched for you. And yeah, it's been cheaper, but when he has pitched for you, it hadn't been anything terribly exciting.
Yeah.
He's had stretches here and there. But yeah, I think something like that. And if you could run Burns, Gray, Fetty, and then I don't know. I mean, is it, at some point in time, it feels like, Quinn Matthews might be up there by the,
Yeah.
midseason or something like that. Tink Hence is probably still a year away. But maybe, if you have, I don't know, Gibson and Michaelis at the back of that rotation, with the idea of there's a push coming, or maybe I mean, you're not going to be able to, because of, especially if you go get a Burns, they're not going to be able to eat the salary and let a Matz or a Michaelis go, I don't think.
Yeah.
So you're probably going to have those in the back. But if you had a rotation of those top three plus, I mean, Michael McGreevy has looked well. He looked good in his MLB start. He looked very good since he's been back in Memphis. Maybe he's unlocked something. Some of the, and even even a Graceffo, or, if some of the other pitchers could stay healthy, even a couple of young pitchers at the back of that rotation, even if they're not necessarily going to be great, bring a little bit more interest and excitement than seeing the same old retreads for the fourth or fifth year.
Agreed. That's well put, because that's kind of what I was trying to go with, because I think that not only I think your fan apathy is based off your roster apathy too, because I'm like, this is the same song and dance, and yeah, they perform well, and you're right. I'm a huge Lance Lynn guy, and I was a big fan of the Gibson signing. I just don't think you can re-up from that. And at one point in the year, I thought, okay, I think you can get away with this maybe for another year until you wait till some of the young guys come along. That was also with the expectation that the stars were going to hit,
Right.
which hasn't completely happened until the past maybe 3 weeks. But you're right. I mean, that's the thing, is I think that that's going to lend itself to a bigger problem if you're running out the same thing. I think expectations have to change, and it's you. I feel like you've rebuilt that culture, which is fluid in big leagues, because I know you do your groundwork about who you want to bring in and stuff like that.
Mhm.
But I mean, these are $1 million athletes as well, and I just think that there needs to be a change. And there's a lot of guys that I like in Cardinals uniforms, and have thought that their time has worked well. That I think, well, that there may need to be a change there. And it comes to this is minimalizing it at the highest level. This kind of needs to turn into Contreras' team a little bit if you're going to keep him. That I think that probably needs to be the face. That needs to be the transition. We need to do Contreras, Burleson, Walker win type situation, to where, hey, this is who we are now. We're not longing for the Yachty days, and we're not we're looking at the downside of the career for two potential Hall of Famers.
Yep.
And I think that you need to hang your hat on that and be aggressive in how you approach it.
It feels, you're right. Expectations need to change. And the fastest way for expectations to change is to change the people that have the expectations.
Yep.
And we saw the first signs of that yesterday. The Cardinals announced that Gary Larocque, who has been director of player development, he's one of the many assistant general managers that the organization has, is retiring at the end of the year. Will stick around as an advisor for next year. Larocque has been in charge of the farm system for 12 years. He took over when Mosaic moved on and moved up. it's interesting to see that he's done this longer than anybody but Branch Rickey in the Cardinal organization. Tells you that he's been there quite some time. He's also 71, and it feels like, not that the game's different, right? I mean, he's been doing, like I said, he's been in baseball for like almost 50 years now. It's a lot different than it was, and we have seen the issues with players being developed. I think it was a good time to. I think this is the first indication that they're going to do some changes and maybe some significant changes in the management of this team this winter.
No, yeah, I completely agree. I mean, it's been a name that's been around for a long time, and I hope that this is all on, ends on a good note,
Mhm.
all the way around. But yeah, I think that this is the sign of things to come. And like you, I think that you and I are both in agreement that there's not going to be a whole, you're not going to see a fired front office. You're going to see a lot of redirection and a lot of the names that we know that are in front of the media probably will not be the case next year. And I think there's going to be some potential changes made of to be the face of the franchise in the front office a little bit, And
Mhm.
I'm a Mo fan regardless, and
Yeah.
I think the problem stems from higher than him, and I don't think that I'm on an island on that either. And so I think that's where a lot of the apprehension comes of any of these moves is the fact that, hey, no matter who's in charge there, that um, the buck stops, so to
Mhm.
speak, with at the top. The I do hope that this is the sign of, hey, let's go in, let's change the mindset a little bit, and let shake the tree, so to speak. And I think that this is maybe one of the first moves to show that we're moving in that direction a little bit. And I part of me is, I know we talked about it last week, is the next GM in the organization right now. I
Yeah.
don't, and I wonder if it's not, if we're not going to see a change of Flores and Gersh type situation. So I don't know. It could be an exciting offseason on things that us baseball nerds think are exciting, but not so much for the stuff on the field per se.
Yeah, it may not change ticket sales a whole lot, but,
Yeah,
the people that are the decisions that these new people make might. Yeah, I don't I think it's, you know, uh, our old friend Rusty Groppel put out last night that he thought it made more sense for Bloom to take this role, this player development role, than the GM role that everybody has seemed to
sure.
have put on him, or the president of baseball operations role. And that's a possible too. I mean, we still haven't determined. I don't know if, Bloom has, when Bloom was hired, he was going to basically be kind of working out of Boston, right, and coming into St. Louis, and his family was still there. And that, player development still feels like a job that's probably not done in St. Louis, versus, president of baseball operations. So it may have something to do with that. It may be that he's, more comfortable with, or more excited about, player development than some of the other things. And who knows? Bloom could be. If I think that if the GM is in the organization, it's Hein Bloom. I can't imagine, as much as Randy Flores has done, and as long as Michael Gersh has been sitting in that, waiting room, to be the guy making all the decisions. I just can't imagine that the Cardinals can shift from what they have now to somebody that's already been there, right? They need some sort of outside change, and whether that's Hein Bloom, whether that's they, do a search, and try to bring in um, some young assistant GM of somebody else's team. Kim Ning, is that still out there? Maybe interview with her. There's a number of people that, smart people, and that's part of what they need, right? I mean, I think we talked about it last week. I know a lot of people have, about how many people they lost to Houston when Jeff Ludnow left. They really didn't do a good job of saying you can't. They finally had to step in and say you can't take any more. But he took a lot of people when he left.
Yeah,
And it's, there's an argument, and I think the Bens have made it quite often on Cardinals off day, that, they've never really replaced that. And they kind of need to, right? They need to start looking for the young guys that are more like cutting edge, and really have a feel for what this organization or what baseball is these days, and be able to bring in and develop, because the Cardinals are going to have that pipeline of talent because of their payroll limitations, right? I mean, that's where they've fallen down. It's less about not spending money, because maybe they don't spend like we want them to, but they still spend money probably above their class. It's one, how they spend it, and two, the
Yeah.
fact that they haven't had all this young talent to come in and give them above average production for minimum salary.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, that's because I saw the payroll comparison between St. Louis and Milwaukee this week, and
Mhm.
it kind of blows you away, and you're thinking, well, crap. And it's one of the situations to where I don't know. Right now, Milwaukee is 10 years ago St. Louis,
Right.
because
Yeah.
everything kind of falls in their lap. And I think that they've kind of taken the St. Louis model of how they've done it, and you gamble early, and you're raking in the chips at this point.
Mhm.
And I think the Cardinals need to kind of go back to that, and I need a refresher of getting out of front of the free agency, and getting out in front of some of these trades. The things that we've been saying for 8 years or so on this show. And I'm not saying that we're right, but I feel like that has added to the lack of fan interest, and to see that you're getting lapped in development and aggressiveness by just about every team in the division. And that is, to me, is the thing that scares you the most, because you look at a Cincinnati who, yes, they're in that perpetual rebuild and they can't really step out of it, but they do have a roster that could potentially do that now.
Yeah.
Then you look at Pittsburgh, who they're going to have two guys that are considered aces, at the front of the rotation. But I mean, they've kind of stubbed their toe in just about every situation. Then you have Milwaukee, who's really clicking, and then you worry about now
Mhm.
the council effect is starting to happen in Chicago,
Yeah.
and I feel like you need to act, and all the signs are pointing to that, and I hope that the lack of attendance is not the biggest excuse of why they don't make any moves to improve the team, because I think that you're going to be in a lot of trouble if you don't.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you're right. This division is, we came into it thinking it was a very weak division, and it fairly much is, but it's a very competitive division in the fact that, yeah, the Reds have an up and coming team, I think, that we thought was going to maybe take that step this year. But, they had the second pick in the draft this year, and they're going to have young talent coming in, that's going to add to what they've already got. Pittsburgh is, for a while there this year, Pittsburgh looked like, they added at the trade deadline, right? I mean, they look
Yeah,
like they could make a run at that last wild card spot, and it kind of fell apart on them in August. But you're right. I mean, their rotation, and they've got some young talent as well. I don't think that they're going to be that guaranteed last place team for much longer, at least for a span. I mean, Pittsburgh always feels like it's going to be eventually, but they can't really get away from that long term. But they have moments where they have good years. You always worry about the Cubs. I mean, because one, they're the Cubs, but two, the financial aspect that they have there if they want to do that. It's probably been to the Cardinals' benefit that the Ricketts are less likely to spend money than the
yeah,
Cardinals are. But yeah, they're developing some players, and then Milwaukee, who is just, you're right. I think the comparison of the Cardinals about 10 years ago is very apt, because they are getting the most out of everybody. They're winning when people don't expect them to. Um, you know, the only thing that they're doing is they're doing it on a more limited scale, because Cardinals would never have traded a Corbin Burns, or they wouldn't have traded a Josh Hader a few years ago. They wouldn't have done that. They would have kept them around as long as they could. Milwaukee's been able to you know take those guys and still be able to be able to turn that into a good situation. So I think that for the longest time, for probably 20 something years, the Cardinals were the team to beat in this
yeah,
division. um, you know People would rise and fall. Reds would be good for a couple of years, Brewers would be it came and went. The Cardinals were always there, and that's not the case anymore. This is Milwaukee's division, and until something shows that it's not. I think that you're going to go into the next probably the next 2 or 3 years, maybe, saying that Milwaukee's the favorite. They may not win, but they're the favorite. And it's their division, and you have to go through Milwaukee. And I think the Cardinals can do things that change that, but they're going to have to get back to what they were, and that really probably leads to a new attitude, because doing the same things that they used to do isn't going to work. The same idea, the idea of trying to be, one step ahead is what they need to get back to, rather than this has always worked, so we're going to keep doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the, um, complacency is the word, and probably poorly used in this situation, but they've definitely fallen into that. And I think that some of that leads to, hey, we're going to be extremely patient on this, and we're going to wait out some of the people that are going to go overspend.
Yeah.
And I think that while that's been successful for them, they're going to have to change that a little bit. And you're right, it's going to have to start from change the way they do spend. Now that is going to be a situation of changing the outlook of the way that you view players and the importance of what they do. And then you worry. I don't worry. I think that they need to bolster the staff in the minor leagues coming up, to where the guys come up and they rake in the minor leagues and can't hit in the big leagues.
Yeah.
I think that there's going to have to be some emphasis on the development side of that as well. And that's financial obligation, so it's one of those to where you're going to have to spend wisely. And I'm curious to see what, how do I say it? How they're going to change that. And it's going to have to be a loud voice, to come in and do that. And it's going to have to be a total buy-in from the whole organization to prove that they know what they're doing.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, whoever they hire, assuming that they hire somebody at President of Baseball Operations, they may very well not, right? Mo may, he's got one more year on his contract. They may not change that, although I feel like there's a really strong chance they do something like they did here with Larocque, and they'll hire somebody, and Mo will be their advisor for the next year, or he'll be in the mix, but he won't necessarily be the one making the decisions. And I think that if they do that, ownership has to buy in and say, okay, whatever you want to do, we're here for you, within some reason, obviously, but they're not going to, go crazy, but still that idea of, hey, okay, if you say we need this or we need that, or we need to change this or we need to change that, we're going to do it, and I hope that that's the buy-in that ownership is willing to make. We'll see. I think that I do think that the DeWitts have a pride in this organization, and I think that
Yes.
the last couple of years have, not been what they want to see, and I think that they're probably committed to making it better. The problem becomes sometimes that how they want to do it, and they're not necessarily willing to commit some of the resources, or they think they can do it on a shoestring, or we can do it this way because we've always done it. We've always been smarter than people. We don't have to have this. And that's, that's not the case anymore. So hopefully that mindset changes somewhat. We will see. We'll see how that goes. And it feels like if there's going to be front office changes, they're going to come really early. If could we see, I know that the last couple of years, especially last year, we didn't get that after, that Monday after the season press conference, or something like that, where they talk about what's coming into the offseason. Do you think that we might see that this year, with this idea of Mo's going to, step away here, and he's going to be, an advisor, or he's going to be in charge of this or that, and we're going to start looking for a new front office? Do you think that could happen, like right after the season?
I would think so, because you would have to. I mean, things pick up. I mean, you're looking at end of contract fiscal year for them is end of October, right, in baseball.
Well, right
Um,
after, right? Yeah, I guess
yeah,
so.
and then so you're going to have to look at those situations of who you're going to bring back and lock down and make commitments to those. Not even just your front office player, so to speak. And then, I mean, you have the GM meetings in early November. I would think that it happens relatively quickly. I would not be surprised if we don't start hearing some of those things by the end of the season either.
Yeah. Yeah, it wouldn't be too surprising, although Cardinals have been pretty good about, keeping those kind of things under wraps at times too, right? I mean, it would not surprise me if we heard a little bit of rumbling of, okay, Mo's gonna step away in like last week or so. But I could also imagine them calling a press conference for Monday or Tuesday, and then that's immediately like that's what we're doing.
Yeah.
While we wouldn't be surprised at we wouldn't have seen it necessarily coming. They have been good at that, at keeping things close to the vest at times.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think you're right. I mean, I think that they have to do that because you want that if there's going to be somebody else in charge, and that's again, maybe they're not, and in that case, no, there wouldn't be. They just Mo would just do Mo stuff, but you got to have somebody there. One, the Gibson, the Lynn options need to be decided on kind of early. But I think the bigger thing is Paul Goldschmidt, right? Goldschmidt is going to be a free agent, likely going to file for free agency because there's only so much you can, cut the salary if they don't. But the way that goalie's hitting over the last 2 or 3 weeks, um, I think that there's a case to be made for bringing him back next year. What do you think?
I the, whether I'm torn on whether I think that it's the right move. But
Mhm.
whenever he admitted that he wanted to come back and play a year, I thought, well, might as well just announce that contract now. Um, do you not feel that way?
I mean, I think that that's a fair way to look at it. When because part of what we were saying this year was like we don't know if he wants to play again. He may want to retire after a season like
Yeah,
this. But also, I think not only did he say he wanted to play, but that he owed the Cardinals something. Um, I think you're probably right that there's something's gonna get worked out, and he's probably gonna be back for next year.
yeah. I was. It's funny because I was listening to last week's Seeing Red. I believe it was last week's, and Will was literally saying the exact same thing. He was like, he's a prideful guy, and he probably does not come back. That would be the situation. That's how they feel. And then Bernie made the comment, well, he still hits the ball hard, but yeah, we can kind of see it going in that direction. But they were both of the whether he comes back or not, they think that they need to make a move. And you know what? I'm not 100% certain. I'm torn on it with him a little bit. I mean, and it goes week to week, honestly.
Mhm.
That I'm thinking, well, you know what? If we are talking about growth and changing and bringing them back, it's kind of tough because you're talking out of both sides of your mouth a little bit. But
Yeah.
but I don't know. You're just like one of those. Well, yeah, the numbers still point that maybe he can hit a little bit, and he's still a good first baseman, and he's 1 year going to set you back. I don't know, but that's we're here we are talking about roster apathy, and I'm dancing around it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think that there's still a lot of pulling up his baseball savant. There's still a lot of red in his thing, even if he
Yeah,
hasn't had the results. His hard hit percentile is 93%, or the 93 percentile. Average exit velocity days. He's still hitting the ball hard. It's not necessarily gone where you'd like it to be, and he's striking out more probably than he has. Um, I think, man, I think there's value still in Paul Goldschmidt. Is that value to the Cardinals? I think so, but I understand why not. Because one, this is going to cost money. Whatever it is, it's still going to cost, right? I mean, even if you get a deal for Paul Goldschmidt for $10 million, and I have no idea if that's even possible. But even if he could come in and play for $10 million, that's $10 million you can't put toward the pitching staff.
yeah,
Um, and if they're talking about kind of tightening the purse strings because people didn't, less attendance this year. Then you worry about, okay, they sign Paul Goldschmidt, but then they don't go for Corbin Burns or something like that, or don't go get something that will help them get better. I think Goldie's probably going to have a better year next year. I think it's interesting to see that he's within 4 on the home runs of what he was last year. So he could reach that. He's, you know, he's improving overall. He's always been a slow starter. He just was a really slow start this year. But I think there's a chance for a bounce back. I just hope that if the Cardinals do re-sign him, that maybe they're a little bit more judicious on how he plays or when he plays. This year he's played. I'd have to look, but he's probably on pace for 150 games this year, which is pretty standard Paul Goldschmidt. But I think with the other options that they have, if he gets off to a slow start, if they sign him and he gets off and he's got a slow April, I think they have to be willing to let him sit on the bench, let him be the guy comes off the bench, because Paul Goldschmidt as a guy off your bench, late inning bat is a threat, right? And let Burleson or Walker or somebody get it some chances at first. Um, I think there's a way to do it. I don't know that if, just bringing him back and pretending like he's just automatically going to get better and we're just playing 150 something games next year is that way.
Yeah, and I think this may have been what I think we're thinking the same thing here is
Mm-hmm.
I don't think you sign him with the expectation that he is going to be on the bench much though. And I do, but I also
Yeah.
can understand that we're talking about a contingency plan if things
Mm-hmm.
were to go this direction. But I feel like if they sign him, he's going to be their guy, and the lineup's not going to change much. And honestly, that's what I expect. I'm
Yeah.
not so certain offensively that things are going to change much, and I'm not, and that worries me a little bit. But I think that they do need to go all in on pitching, and if that hinders it, then it is definitely it's time to move on.
Mhm.
But yeah, that this is going to be the number one or the first test. If of anybody new that they bring in, if they bring in anybody new, as to what to do in this situation. And I think you and I both know the path of least resistance is to sign him.
Yeah, and I think, we focused a lot on the offense. It's still Goldschmidt plays a very good first base still. And I know it's first base and that's not as important, but we have seen bad first base, right? We saw Jose Martinez.
Yeah.
We know what that's like. And when you've got a guy like Mason Wynn, who is at times going to unleash 100 miles an hour across the diamond, you want somebody over there that can catch that ball. And I don't know that it's just as easy as sticking Burleson there or sticking Walker
Yes.
there, or sticking Gorman there. I think that, you know, even if he isn't hitting as much, he does bring something defensively, and that could be a huge deal. I don't know. I'd like to see Goldschmidt back just because I like Paul Goldschmidt, and I'd like to see him retire as a Cardinal. And that if he went off to New York or Los Angeles or whatever, he'd hit 25 to 30 home runs and win a World Series or something. But if he doesn't come back, I'm going to completely understand that. And if you want to argue that it's the best move not to bring him back, I think that I don't know how much I can argue against it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's it. To me, that will be the first sign that, hey, okay, that this is moving in a different direction. And not saying that bringing him back is going to be bad, but
Mhm.
I will say that will be a fairly significant. Well, yeah, I don't know if this one doesn't even play out for a while either. I could see this one if they don't say announce something by the end of the year or early in the
Mhm.
offseason. I mean, it could drag out a while because they have so many other things that they're going to have to look at to change, and a lot of
Yeah.
moving parts here. I mean, this one may not develop as quickly, but I want to say that, hey, if they decide to move on relatively quickly, that's probably going to tell us a lot about what they're thinking. Now, if that's
Yeah.
either, hey, they're either going to be cheaper, or B, they're going in all in.
I think there's a reasonable chance that they talk with Goldschmidt before the offseason and say, look, okay, here's our thinking. We want to bring you back. We want to bring you back at, X amount of dollars, around that amount. But, we want to be able to do something. You know, we want to do other things first. You know, can you let us get, you know, have the last right of last refusal, basically. If you get another offer, can you let us know? Or can we just plan to, you know, maybe put this on the back burner? And I think there's a decent chance that Paul Goldschmidt says, hey, yeah, that's, if something comes up, I'll let you know. But otherwise we'll wait on y'all. I don't know. It really depends, especially if he feels like he, owes people something for the last year, which I think it's nice of him to say, but given what he's produced over his contract, I don't know that that's necessarily accurate. Um, but if he has this desire to come back to St. Louis and, try to improve on what he's done this year, I think he's probably willing to, you know, kind of not demand something to be done pretty quickly.
Yeah. Yeah. I, would you be blown away if, if he resigns before the end of the season?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Because it's what you can only offer somebody 20%, I think, less than their
Oh yeah,
salary.
that's true. Yeah, I didn't
And
think about that
so,
aspect
yeah,
of it. Yeah,
it's the Wainwright, the Wainwright model, basically.
yes,
Let them go to free agency, and then you can sign them to whatever kind of deal you want
very
to.
true, very true. I didn't think about that.
Yeah. Now, do they have a gentleman's agreement beforehand? Maybe. But that
Yes,
also may depend on, again, if they think that they are going to have new people in charge, they probably wait, right, until that new person's in charge, because they may not want to bring Paul Goldschmidt back. So I don't know that Mo makes any commitments to something that he may not be willing, the person that's
yeah,
going to fulfill them.
sure. That's a great point, and I think that kind of that's what I was thinking earlier. That this could be a slow play. Whether the decision will probably be made in private. Um, there's going to have to be a lot more public moves before they come out with it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. This is not the first thing that happens. He doesn't file for free agency and then sign 2 days later. I think this is
Yeah,
probably a slower thing. And I mean, and there's very solid chance that he goes somewhere else. But I don't know. I think that, even though we saw it this year, if you're going into next year with Goldschmidt at your first base, I still don't think you think offense is your real problem, right?
yeah,
If Jordan Walker is making the steps that we're seeing now, you've got Mason Wynn still being Mason Wynn, another year of that. You've got Victor Scott in theory making improvements, or you've got Michael Ciani, depending on, I don't know how they're going to do that. I mean, there's still a lot of optimism. There's the idea that maybe Wilson Chris will stay healthy all year. Um, I don't, not that the offense is going to be like a world beater, but it has a lot of possibilities and potential, and you're really not going to change much anyway. I think honestly, maybe depending on how things work out, the offense might be better with Paul Goldschmidt. I mean, you just never know, but there's a lot of young guys that haven't necessarily clicked yet. And you put one more, having a veteran in that lineup isn't the worst thing if you're not relying on him, like you said, to be the guy, right? I think that you go into the next season, you're looking at this as an ensemble. You're not looking at this as a starring role for Arenado and Goldschmidt.
yeah. Agreed. I mean, um, uh, that's why I think that their big offensive addition this year could be Goldschmidt if that's who they sign, and then you go in on the rotation and go a little bit bigger than you had. That's what I almost expect to happen, but how big they go is what I want to see. And that if that's a new person that's making that call, that's then that would not surprise me at all if it's Goldschmidt at first and they kind of dabble from some of the glut of other positions to kind of do the middling handling of the offseason, or of the offense. But what I hope happens is they try to really move the needle pitching side.
It'd be nice, because
Yeah,
I
I
think
know.
that's,
I feel the exact same way. Just
yeah.
you know,
I mean, if you can think your offense is going to score 4 or 5 runs a game, I mean, that's pretty much an average type of offense. But if you've got enough pitching, you're going to do okay with that. Um, the problem is they've got pitching that allows 4 or 5, 6 runs a game, and so that's not
yeah,
going to work. And you have to also hope that Sonny Gray doesn't have the middle season like he had this year, right? I mean, if he doesn't if he can be more like the Sonny Gray we've seen at at the front and the back, then overall the pitching is going to be better. And then you go out and get another top of the rotation guy, and all of a sudden your staff gets a whole lot better.
Yeah, that's agreed. And that there's an element to me that worries about the expected bounce back from Gray being the big move too. To where the rotation doesn't look too different now. And that's the things that right there. I would love for that to happen. I think that you're at a point now where I think you have to make that happen. And what I mean by that is yay, hey, that'd be great. That would make us that much more better because we signed X here anyway. That's the transition I think needs to be made.
Yeah. And I mean, you can't expect, if you're looking at Sonny Gray's season, I mean, he had those rough outings, but before that, he was also like a sub-2 ERA. I mean, you can't expect that either. So, he's going to be better next year probably overall, but I don't think you expect him to be, take huge steps. If you're, you can't just. I don't think you go into next year thinking Sonny Gray's a Cy Young candidate.
Sure.
He is great, but you definitely can't plan for that. And I think that's kind of what the Cardinals did this year, right? Because that's we talked all winter. They need somebody. Sonny Gray needs to be there too, or heck, ideally 3, but that's really asking a lot. But they needed to be. You needed what we said. They needed at least 2 guys better than Michaelis, and they didn't get it. And that's just where we're at. So maybe they'll look at that this year. I don't know. I think that I haven't looked to see who else is on the market, because Burns does feel like a super stretch for them. But there's got to be somebody. You got to bring somebody in that's at least on par with Sonny Gray, right?
Yeah.
You can't bring in a 3 behind him and Fetty, because I just don't think that's not going to be as much of an upgrade over what you've got, that you might as well just not spend your money.
Yeah. No, completely agree. I mean, that's the complacency that I think that we've talked about basically the whole show. And that's you need to go for it. And I think that unfortunately, I mean, you backed yourself into the corner where the names are going to fill the seats, and you're going to have to go after it.
Yeah. We have seen Jordan Walker play quite a bit over the last, there was a bit of a little uproar when he didn't play on Wednesday. He don't have a day off here and there, but for the most part, they've committed to letting him play every day. Hit a home run last night. Had the 5 hits in New York, including a home run. He's still figuring it out, right? But it's nice to see at least a few moments for a guy that's I don't want to say had a lost year, but it kind of almost feels like it.
Yeah, no, and I just wonder on that situation too, that if this is not a warning sign, and I hope that it all works out, and I think it will. And I think there needs to be chips pushed into letting him play. I mean, you can see what's happened with Cheerios. You know what I mean? In Milwaukee, you see what's happening with Merrill Kelly. I mean, it was a commitment to these guys, and of course they pushed their way into the lineup by hitting, but it was a commitment to them, and both teams are paying off. San Diego was very good. I think I was really impressed when they were in St. Louis, and yeah, I hope that they stick with the commitment, because I think that you've got to see the jump from here on out of Walker, and I understand he's young, and Gorman as well. I mean, that's to improve. You've got those guys, and those are big ifs.
Yeah, I think Gorman's going to be a really interesting situation this winter.
Yeah.
Cardinals have the Mariners 2 more. Then they've got a day off, Reds, and then go up to Toronto for 3. So we will see how things develop this week, see if there's any more indications of significant change coming, and be back at you next Saturday as the Cardinals are in Canada. But until then, for Alan, I'm Daniel. Good night.
Good night.